You really have to accept the fact that you're not a pro athlete. It's not your job. You really don't need your performance and current fitness level to be yet another source of stress. I was listening to some other former Masters national time trial champion who's now in his 50s, and he said his approach currently is also he doesn't even have goal event. He says, I take fitness as it comes, which I thought was, at least for me, that really resonated, because certainly when you're balancing work and life and family obligations, it can really backfire if you've just set yourself up saying, I have this target event, it's my only one for this year, and this is the one I'm going to do or die on. That's just kind of setting yourself up for failure. But what you can do instead is you do have a bit more available time. If your job is such that the stress comes in episodically, then maybe you can, and then suddenly the fitness comes, right? Because maybe you've been able to stack together 2 or 3 months of proper training, and then you go and hunt for an event to use it on, right? As opposed to saying up front, like, oh, this is my target event and I'm going to travel hundreds of miles to get there and, all the rest of it.
I am Venky, a working professional in IT as well as an amateur masters athlete and a coach for endurance sports. You are listening to the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, I have a small request from you. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also let me know what you like and what you would like to listen to more of by commenting in the comment section on YouTube. I promise to do my best to improve with each episode and bring you the best content that helps you and me get better each day. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, the Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyVenky on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast.
All right, Mark, welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast.
Thank you. Honored to be here at the premier Indian cycling podcast.
Thanks for the title. All right. So, Mark, I wanted to use this opportunity to, sit down and learn a little bit more about you and share that with the Working Athlete Podcast, audience. The first time I met you was in my first Tour of Nilgiris, and which was TFN 2011, back in 2011. And during the tour, I was observing, I was this, curious person, complete noob when it comes to cycling. I was on my fixed gear bike. I was like, flappy, jerseys and, dirty looking helmet and all of that, right? I was like looking at you, Raj, and a few others who were like, looked like proper pros, It was like a it was a revelation for me that the entire tour of Nilgiris, that experience was so such a learning experience for me that I got to learn so much just by watching you guys and trying to ride with you guys whenever you guys were slow except for the competitive segment, right? It was such a beautiful experience. Eh, what do you remember from that time?
I remember this strange bald guy on a fixed gear bicycle. Um, and not only me, but others were deeply concerned about the status of your knees because I just, particularly because with the TFN, there was a fair amount of climbing and descending.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't need to tell you, but like climbing is doable, right?
Yeah.
You might have to get out of the saddle, but it's not going to kill you. Descending on a fixed gear bike is like, it's not a question of like if, but when, there's too much damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite the interesting adventure. It's funny because so that was 14 years ago. I and my wife were living for like a year and a half, I think, in Mysore. And as you said, people would often say that, oh, you're a pro cyclist. And I was thinking, no, you have no idea. Like there's so many levels between me and an actual pro, right? But the thing that was very fun for me in the TFN was that it did kind of feel a little bit like a pro race would feel in terms of like, there's actually motorcycles with cameras right next to me as I'm riding, and like, I'd never had an experience like that either before or since,
Right.
So that was quite the experience.
Yeah. So I we'll talk more about TFN, in a bit. But when you were growing up and stuff, what was your relationship with sport during that time?
So I came to like serious sports relatively late. And I can tell you the story, but it was like, it's right around my 30th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So like first part of my life, I was, let's face it, a nerd, So like, I was like, I ended up with like 2 graduate degrees. I went to MIT, I started university when I was 16. So it's sort of like that period of my life, it was all about that. And so I was working at a software startup at the time. And sort of as like a corporate challenge, I and 3 other guys who were at the company and their wives, just on the spur of the moment, all competed in this local sprint triathlon.
Wow.
And until that time, I was like harboring this illusion that I was still basically a fit person, even though like there was no reason for me to think that, as was proven because I came in after all 3 of those guys and their wives. And so that was a wake-up call. And I think many people who come to like a sporting background as an adult, they often experience sort of the wake-up calls. Because until then, I thought like, oh, I'm kind of okay. But, I weighed at that time maybe 95 kg, and that was not muscle, I started with just running. And that whole experience, by the way, gave me a lot of sympathy for anyone who's like starting to try to get fit. Because at a certain point, and I'm sure you've gone through this, you feel bad if you're not working out, right? But in the initial phase, you feel bad while you're working out, and it's not just like it's a good kind of pain. You feel physically ill, I mean, your body is fighting you every step of the way. And I have to say in like my whole experience in terms of like endurance sports, that was the toughest period. And I would not have ever made it, in fact, because psychologically it's so hard. Except one of my coworkers' wives would literally come to my house each morning before work and force me to run a 5K. Now, it wasn't actually running. Like initially, it was sort of like jog, walk, Anyway, so she got me through that first 3 months. And then, there's that switch that turns where, again, you start feeling bad if you're not working out, right?
Yeah.
And so then I no longer needed her. And in fact, by then I was beginning to be a little bit faster than her.
Yeah.
Anyway, to finish the punchline, like a year later, we went to the same event and I beat them all.
Wow.
So that was sort of the reward. And then, and I continued then through my 30s. I would do some bicycle racing, as well as a few triathlons. I never did an Ironman, but I did a few halves. I got to like a Cat 3 as a road cyclist, which is sort of like, obviously that's in the middle because the starting is Cat 5 and the US Cat 1 is the top.
Yeah.
And I lost a lot of weight. So at that time people loved numbers, right? So at that time, at my best, I was like 75 kg. I'm, 6'3", which is whatever, 190 centimeters.
Lean for your
very lean for my height. And FTP around 340. So my watts per kilo was around, 4.4, 4.5, which is enough, again, to be Cat 3. It's actually not enough to get above. Like a Cat 2, Cat 1, you have to have an FTP around 5, realistically, right? And so that was sort of my fittest. And then I was single, I could ride 200 miles a week, which you kind of have to be competitive and so on. So that was through my 30s. And then I got married, and then I had my other work and everything else, usual kind of thing. My wife is Indian. And so we came to, for various reasons, she wanted to sort of see, she's a doctor, and she wanted to sort of see the use of Ayurveda and other things within India. So we were living in Mysore. So that was when I did TFN. And then I was already, I was not riding as much. I hadn't been fit, but, just to show my gradual decline over the years, so then I was a little heavier, definitely not as fit. So my FTP then was maybe like 310 or something. Definitely heavier at that time. But still, back then my VO2 max was, when I was in the 30s was high 60s. And then, my 40s, low 60s. And now it's about 50, right?
Yeah.
And, again, when I was competing, like as a Cat 3 in my 30s, I remember seeing after a really hot criterium, my heart rate was 200.
Yeah.
Now my max heart rate is like, 175, 180. So it's just kind of sad as these things happen.
Yeah.
And so now my weight is about 85 and my, FTP on a good day might be 300. And that's no man's land. So certainly where I live around San Francisco Bay Area, that's one of the most competitive areas there is. So basically to be competitive in the local masters racing scene there, you would have to be competitive at the national level.
Yeah.
So, my current, fitness, as I said, is no man's land. So it's like not fit enough really to do open masters racing, but like fitter than local recreational club rides.
Right.
So that's kind of where I am now. And I made a personal decision like several years ago that I didn't want to like be a scrawny, for my height, 75 kg fellow. And part of the reason is that I sort of saw my own parents as they aged. I'm thinking, look, I don't want to like, what's the point? I'm not a pro, obviously.
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus on just general health, right?
Yeah.
And I knew from the gym that like anything below 85 kgs, I was losing serious strength. And I saw my parents, both of them got to the point where they couldn't get up from a chair,
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided I need to sort of build up strength and muscle, this useless upper body muscle, which no self-respecting cyclist would have.
Right.
And so that's why I sort of expanded. And even now I'll do 2 gym sessions a week. And I'll still ride, minimum 4 times a week, something like that. But at this point, my weekly mileage is only about 100 miles at most.
Mm.
Anyway, that was a very long answer to a short question, but
No, but that's interesting, right? Interesting that you mentioned that the importance of muscle as we age,
yeah,
right? And you saw your own parents like aging, if you can say it, aging poorly,
yes,
right? In the sense that they were not able to get off a chair even, right? That is nowadays lot of these longevity gurus and all tell you that grip strength is a good indicator, which is like you can increase it by focusing on strength training and stuff. And muscle itself
Yeah.
is very important, more so as you age, because as you age you tend to lose muscle, the sarcopenia or whatever they call it, right? So interestingly enough, 2022 I had a crash, and I broke my collarbone. And till then I was like, for years I've been hearing about, when I started riding, it was like uh, weight training. You get stronger on the bike by spending more time on the bike.
exactly. Low cadence training and stuff like that. Yeah.
You do the strength sessions
That
on
was
the
the
bike.
old school idea.
Old school idea, right? And then there came a phase where some people were talking about actively advocating strength training will help you.
Yeah, it shifted to like advocating, like, oh, you should do weight training in the off season.
Right.
And now it's shifted to full weight training all year, even as a cyclist.
Right.
And that's even purely from a cycling performance perspective, let alone just general health span.
Right. So what I was trying to make a point was like, for years I've been following this various theories about strength training and how they help your on bike strength and all that, but never got myself to a gym, right? Never
Yeah.
got myself to a weight room.
But then you had to do
But-
rehab.
But I had to do a rehab, and that's when I first got back into gym after maybe decades. And I had to force myself to spend that time there, and slowly I could see the differences, right? And then this idea of it's not just about being better on the bike, but as we age, right now I am getting close to 50, that thought process, okay, there might be a time when I'm like 80, 90, if if we are lucky, right? And I should be able to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Right. So this whole idea of fitness, and I started this journey of fitness to take care of, to be healthy enough to take care of my kids, right?
Yeah.
And now I have to continue to take care of my health as I age, and not be a burden to them.
Yeah.
Right. So that became the thought process, and said, okay, I need to be a regular at the gym so that I can build muscle and not lose the muscle as quickly as without working out. And your thought, and it kind of resonates when you say that we need to take care of our general well-being through weight training. Nice. But let us talk about your journey when you were competing. What sort of races and what sort of training were you doing?
So, yeah, so the Bay Area, as I mentioned, is one of the most competitive road cycling things. And as you may have heard as well, like the popularity of road cycling through the past decades has sort of like gone up and down. Its pinnacle was actually even before I got seriously into it, There used to be lots of popular, races in throughout the country in like the 70s and so on. And then there's been like a gradual die-off. Now, ironically, of course, gravel cycling is taking over. And at the moment, it's already transitioned once again to the Europeans being dominant there. But still, many of the gravel races and the top ones are in the US now. I don't know the exact statistics, but I'm guessing there's as many competitive gravel events at this point as there are elite road cycling events. But certainly the dominant type of race in the USA are criteriums, which is obviously not the case in a lot of other places. In Northern Europe and so on, they have other kinds of things that are more like circuit races, but they're not like these intense technical things where you've got like 8 turns in like 1 kilometer, and so they're extremely hectic and nerve-wracking. And if I get a little bit fitter, maybe I'll go back to that, but only with like people my own age who don't want to like risk their life and limb for some meaningless thing. So I was doing a lot of criteriums, and I think you're probably familiar with that. It's sort of like you've got to have one foot in the pedal at the start because it's going to go like that. People are going to be like attacking. But I had some good coaching there. So when I was first getting into it, so there's this fellow named Larry Nolan, who's like a world record holder as a masters in multiple events, sprint and so on. And I remember at the time, like as a Cat 5, which is the beginning category. And here's this guy, he's not even in the peloton. He's like riding casually next to the peloton in the wind the whole time, moving freely around, giving people advice. And I'm completely gassed, trying to just tail gun and so on. But he was like, so helpful as a mentor, and he would give some basic advice, which of course has to be varied. Like, for example, he'd say, okay, in the first third of the race, ignore all attacks. They're meaningless. Those people are just going to cook themselves, right? They're never going to get away. And then in the middle third, you have to know who the riders are, right? And then in the last third, you have to cover everything because you never know, but then of course that advice changes depending on here. So like if it's him, everybody knew who he was. He couldn't take that approach. He would even explain. He says the only way that he ever does it is he has to let the breakaway go until they're almost unreachable, and then he will do a solo bridge that's so hard and so fast nobody can follow him. Right? So it's different strategies. But anyway, so there was a lot of good coaching and mentorship that was like a big part of that at the time.
Nice. And what sort of crates were these? Are they weekday crates in parking lots, or how were they?
So so there are different types of races, but some of them are so-called industrial crits. So they would be on weekends in industrial parks, sometimes with like rough roads. But the best ones were ones that were like co-sponsored with cities. So they'd be downtown criteriums. There are a lot of well-known ones there, like the so-called Davis Criterium, which is in Davis, California, downtown. So the city is fully involved. They shut down the roads, good quality ones. There's others, Cat's Hill, Santa Cruz Criterium. They're all well-known in the Bay Area, and all of them are downtown criteriums. People will be sitting in the restaurants, outdoors watching them. And so that's the typical setting. And they're always on the weekends. And, in the middle of the racing season, there might be a criterium on one day and the road race the next day. Because, again, if you're elite, and I never really got to that truly elite phase, the criterium on the Saturday would be like the warm-up for the road race the next day, right? Because a 1 hour criterium isn't going to affect them. But another, thing is that throughout the week, is availability of a lot of group rides even. So, you know, there's this very famous thing called the noon ride, which would be like Tuesdays at noon in the Bay Area, and local pros or semi-pros would show up for that. Because Tuesday is like, you know, you recover on Monday, and Tuesday is like a good day for intensity because you'll be well recovered by the weekend. Because as you may know, again, if you want to be competitive, even at an amateur level, you can't be a weekend warrior. It just does not work. So you need to get some of that intensity there. One thing I've now learned as I've gotten older is that, yeah, my performance numbers have gone down, like the rule of thumb about whatever, 10% per decade. Yeah, I'm seeing that. My FTP goes down, my VO2 max. The thing that really goes down is recovery rate. It's like, and that's true of everything, like in the gym, intensity on the bike, anything. Stuff that I used to be able to recover from in like 1 day or 2 days now can take like 4 or 5 days. You know, like 1 day of like really intense hard work on the gym takes 5 days at least to recover from. You know, and I did like a 1 week tour in Europe earlier this year. I wasn't like high intensity, but a lot of endurance. It was like 300 miles in a week. I don't know, 25, 30,000 feet of climbing.
Wow.
So I was cooked at the end. Now I know, because I've done similar like tours in Europe in the past, like when I was much younger, that I would recover in 1 week and then I'd be flying. You know, you feel like Superman. You get that rebound fitness and it's fantastic. This time, here I am, 61 years old. 1 week, I'm still demolished. Like I got on my bike to try to ride and I literally turned around after 10 minutes because it's sort of like, oh my God, I'm not ready. So then I try again, like at the 2 weeks, I'm thinking, is the rebound fitness there? And no, I'm still feeling tired. And I could see it in my numbers, you know, my resting heart rate, all the rest of it, still not there. I didn't detect like rebound fitness until like 3 weeks after that event. So that's like 1 week of intensity, 3 weeks of recovery. And frankly, I don't think that's actually an efficient way to train, right? But that's what that's really the thing that affects me the most as like an older cyclist is that recovery rate. Because it's such a fine line. You have to be consistent, but you can't like just go out and kill yourself and recover in 2 days like when you're young, right? You can be an idiot when you're younger and still get a lot faster. But you have to have really measured efforts when you're older. But then if you take too long to recover, then you lose fitness. So it's like that consistency, but like with really like intelligent spacing has been really critical.
So what sort of training or riding do you do nowadays compared to before?
So that's, you know, one thing as I got older, I guess I'm getting a little bit more psychological insight as well. So I would say, like, I sort of semi-retired a year ago. For most of all of last year, I didn't do any structured training. It was purely cycling for like psychological recovery. It wasn't to add stress to my life. It was to remove stress from my life. You know what I mean? I would find a nice route to, you know, not supposed to do this, but I would wear headphones, you know, all the rest of it, you know? I was only this year where I honestly felt that I had recovered from this intense, you know, work life and everything else. So now I'm getting a bit more structured. And so like every week I will definitely do one long ride, like 3-4 hours. And then once or twice a week, I'll do some kind of like hill repeats with sprinting, just because I'm not really, I'll be honest, I'm not like super coordinated as a sprinter. So in terms of getting intensity, I find it a lot easier to do sprint repeats uphill, right? Because you're just fighting it. When I try to do like sprint repeats on the flats, I just start getting spastic after like 3 or 4 seconds, right? And then I'm trying to shift and it's just not working. If I really wanted to improve my sprinting, like to be a competitive racer, I would have to do that. But I'm just doing like the hill repeats or the sprints to improve my fitness. So on that basis, it works a lot better for me to do them uphill. So I'll do 1 or 2 of those sessions per week. And then the rest is just like, frankly, recreational riding. So it's semi-structured. I wouldn't say this is like a structured program. And then I'll go to the gym twice a week.
Yeah, yeah, nice. So now you're saying you're kind of semi-retired and all that. But when you were working, right? How did you manage your work life versus following your passion for cycling and training for it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say,
Especially when you were like competing at Cat 3 and stuff.
yeah, so I wouldn't say I managed that terribly well, in part because I wasn't, I want to say, forgiving enough of myself. Like, only in retrospect have I really truly appreciated how much life stress can affect your physical performance. Like, as much as I've done, reading and everything else about like all of this, I frankly just didn't believe it for myself. I said, you just have to HTFU, right? Like, who cares about your life stress? Just get out and do it.
Right.
But that just doesn't work. And I really saw that firsthand. So I think that's one thing that I wouldn't say I did very well at back then when I was trying for like a sort of like work balance with cycling. I just wasn't like understanding enough of myself. It's only in retrospect that I saw, oh my God, like you should not have even been trying to do something at that point. But definitely I was still trying to do that. I would do at least, a few criteriums a year, maybe a sprint triathlon. I haven't done a longer Olympic distance triathlon for several years, but just for fun. I would, and during that period, again, as we were discussing, you cannot get anything approaching race fitness being a weekend warrior. It's just too much of a gap. And I knew that.
Right.
So, my minimum during that period when I was working is that I would definitely do a ride on Saturday and Sunday and get at least one good intensity in the middle of the week. And that was my minimum. So I set a sort of minimum standard for myself of doing that and at least one gym trip per week.
Right.
And again, that wasn't enough to even that was probably not enough to improve fitness, but it was enough to maintain. Right. So it sort of set a minimum level. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. So when you said you were not like forgiving yourself and, how your approach was more like HTFU. So what sort of, because you now have the benefit of observing life over long period, right? What sort of advice would you give people who are like working athletes?
Yeah, so I think again it's you really have to accept the fact that you're not a pro athlete. It's not your job, and you're never going to be a pro athlete, and you have these other obligations. And so you really don't need your performance and, your current fitness level to be like yet another source of stress, right? And it should in fact be a source of like, again, maybe not like restoration, but at least, not a source of additional stress. And I was listening to some other like former like Masters national time trial champion who's now in his like 50s. And he said his approach currently is also, he doesn't even have goal events. He says, I take fitness as it comes, which I thought was, at least for me, that really resonated because certainly when you're balancing work and life and family obligations, it can really backfire if you've just set yourself up saying, I have this target event, it's my only one for this year, and this is the one I'm going to do or die on. That's just kind of setting yourself up for failure. But what you can do instead is sort of like based on like you do have a bit more available time. If your job is such that the stress comes in episodically, then maybe you can, and then suddenly the fitness comes, right? Because maybe you've been able to stack together 2 or 3 months of fitness training, proper training. And then you go and hunt for an event to use it on, right? As opposed to saying up front, like, oh, this is my target event and I'm going to travel, whatever, hundreds of miles to get there and, all the rest of it.
Right. So be more flexible and understanding of yourself and, a little bit more self-aware and plan around your other life events.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And being aware of your own condition, because, I think that it sounds strange, but you can have all the symptoms of overtraining when you're almost not doing any training, right? Because if you have enough added up other stress, you haven't slept right for weeks on end, right? And you're like constantly thinking about like either your personal issues or work issues and all the rest of it. Your body is like full of stress hormones, and you're going to start having all of those similar symptoms, right? You're not in a state to do proper training.
Yeah. Nice. So let us come and talk a little bit about your India experience and So when was the time? What brought you here? Like you said, your wife, a doctor, wanted to explore Ayurveda and stuff like that. So when did you come here, and what was the experience of riding here and stuff?
Yeah, so that was, again, that was 14, 15 years ago. I was fortunate enough that I could do remote work from the US. So all you need is the internet. Right now, that's commonplace, right? But at the time, it was like I was fortunate to have that, particularly because it was like a completely rotated time zone.
Yeah.
But I had my bicycle, and so there was like frequently, she would travel around and work with different medical centers and so on. But then I hooked up with some local cyclists, which is gradual pros. So in my stores, there's Chamandi Hill.
Right.
And then I was so like relieved when I saw another cyclist in Chamandi Hill who was wearing a proper cycling jersey. And anyway, so I met a few people there and gradually expanded. And that's sort of how I even discovered that there was a cycling community. Because of course in my store, there was like 3 guys and they all knew each other, right? That was the cycling community there.
Yeah.
And then gradually expanded. And of course, already Bangalore had a beginning scene. But then as now, what I've observed is that there aren't like a sort of like, there's not like a community of like recreational cyclists, like club level cyclists, right? I mean, if I'm being frank, what I see a lot then and now is most of the cyclists are basically racer wannabes. You know what I mean? They're really committed and they're super competitive and so on. And yeah, there's a role for that. That exists in the US too, but there's a lot of more gradations, So in the US, and certainly in the Bay Area, there's a lot of like, sort of like cycling clubs that don't have a racing team.
Yeah.
Like a well-known one is the so-called Fat Cake Club. You can find it on Strava, right? And their whole point is that every ride ends with cake, And, their rides are generally no-drop rides, and it's just a very supportive community.
Yeah.
And a lot of bike shops, like, there's the Swell ride. There's a number of these rides. And it's just, some people show up on e-bikes because they're not as fast. Maybe there's a couple on a tandem. And even when I was trying to get back my fitness, I would join them, and then I would join sort of the next level of guys who are like, maybe they raced like me, like whatever, 20 years back. They don't have the same level of fitness. And like one of the bigger clubs in the Bay Area, it's called Alto Velo. They actually have every weekend 3 different rides, A, B, and C. So like the C ride is for like the the sort of like the more recreational level, and those are no drop rides. And then the B rides, that's about where I am right now. And then the A ride is for the Cat 1, Cat 2s, and then there's others like just other rides, so there's the full spectrum between like the no drop recreational rides that are centered around ending at some cafe, and finding the place with the best croissants or cakes or cookies, right? And then there are the other extremes, which are the opposite of no drop. There's this guaranteed drop, right? Where basically it's like, Cat 1, Cat 2s are just drilling it. And then, even at my fittest, it was just a question of like, how far can I get with them before I get dropped, right? And that's the whole point. They're just trying to like shed everybody, right? And so it's basically, that's a simulated race type ride.
Right.
And then there's the middle where it's basically like the racers, Cat 3 or below, who are, or maybe they're not racing, but they're still holding a lot of fitness, that are sort of in between. They're probably not going to wait for you if you have a flat, but they're also not trying to like shed you at every opportunity.
Right.
So that whole spectrum, and again, India will get there, I'm sure. But right now, as certainly back then, there's just seemed to be that gap.
Right. No, I agree, and especially back then. Now, what we are seeing, with the benefit of me being here and observing a little bit more, there are clubs that are coming that they're not interested in racing and stuff. Like Velo Coffee comes into the mind. A woman-only club, which is called Spokeswomen, who are there, and quite a few other, BCC and stuff like that. Bangalore Cycling Club, there is one club, and I think Mysore also have one or two clubs there. These things are coming up, and it's great to see. And there's a lot of brevet riding that is happening, like longer endurance rides and stuff. And one thing that is definitely missing, and that I want to bring, and I want to see it happen, and I want to contribute towards that, is that graded group rides, right? That has been on my mind forever, but I've not been able to kind of put some work towards it, because the ride we did this morning, we started that back in 10 years back now, like, and it happens every every Saturday 6:30 people show up and just ride, right? And there used to be similar ride on Sunday on Old Madras roadside, which unfortunately is not happening now, but this is like going on,
which is great.
And here the problem is, it's always like in the middle ground. Some people are just sprinting every flyover and going on, dropping people, but there are people who wants to like get used to group riding and bike handling and all that. So bringing in that graded, or like defining the speeds and stuff like that, having a non-drop group versus a middle one and a faster one, I think we will see a lot more uptick in group riding by introducing that. And I'll work with a few other guys to kind of work towards bringing that about, because unless we do something about it, it's not going to magically happen, right? It's the same with everything. Like races, we were complaining about not having enough races. I said, okay, a few of us decided to speak about it, and started Bangalore amateur racing bar, and it's been happening for last 12 years. So like that, I think this is a great point that I want to work towards that.
And then, to be honest, I never really understood like in India, the idea of like the racing season, like in the US, there's a very clear racing season. In India, I just couldn't quite make sense of like, is there some trajectory? But in the US, it's very common in January and February because the racing season only starts March, April.
Yeah.
So in January and February, there are so-called training races and a lot of clinic rides. And so I was mentioning this fellow, Larry Nolan, who's been like an amazing fellow in the Bay Area. He's mentored so many cyclists. But, you know, and that's a situation where you can have this experience of riding like inches away from somebody, and you can get hit with an elbow and it won't make you seize up and like crash immediately.
Yeah.
And like trusting that your bike isn't, as long as you have good roads and it's not wet, trusting that your bike can actually amazingly hold when you lean it, right? And so that you can learn to like take a turn quickly. All of those basic skills. And, you know, I've seen here in India, you know, you have a lot of these young riders who are amazingly fit. You know, they're just going to be flying up the hills, but they don't necessarily have those pack skills, you know, and so having sort of an experienced person to sort of like give them some of that coaching would be really helpful because, you know, particularly if you're going to have like, it's different with a road race, you got a full road and everything gets shattered as soon as you hit the hills. But criterium, you know, nobody would want to ride next to those beginning racers, right? That's why they have the Cat 5 categories. Cat 5 category isn't because these guys aren't fit. Some people show up with Cat 5 to a Cat 5 race and they have like Cat 2 level fitness because they're these genetic freaks, right? Like some of these young teenage kids, you know, but the reason that they have to go through that process is basically to protect everybody else so that they can go into one of those Cat 5 races and go through that clinic process and that mentoring and get those skills.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is true. You know what is happening here since the talking of racing season, since we have you know weather all year riding weather.
Yeah.
So we don't have a racing season as such, but there is a gap between like December to February, which we don't have much races. But our road calendar kind of starts in March and ends in November, and with a race every alternate. Talking of BBCH, every alternate month, and then there is a bar race, which is like a low-key kind of training race kind of stuff, which happens every month. Every first Sunday of the month, where we do, you know, we experiment with a lot of these formats like criteriums, uphill ITTs, that and this. And these criteriums, we try to, you know, have these riders, you know, practice these corners with experienced guys giving that, you know, introducing the cornering skills and stuff like that.
And drafting, you know, that's something where the skill is like not necessarily obvious. And again, I had these early coaches who are explaining like, okay, when you're drafting, your job is keep an eye on that wheel in front of you, because you can't, it's, when you're behind, it's your duty. It's not his duty, right? And furthermore, you need to have higher cadence because you're not going to be able to be as steady. So you have to sort of pick up the speed, and, you know, you have to manage your gap and get all the rest of it. And you have to be aware of the wind direction and all of this stuff. It's not necessarily obvious how to do proper drafting, but as a beginning racer, man, as you know, that's super critical. You know?
So trying to use these group rides and these smaller races to kind of, you know, bring up a little bit of that culture, that track riding, the you know, skill build up and stuff like that. And, you know, some of us were fortunate enough to have you here, you know, contributing that, imparting that knowledge for us. You were part of Veloscope racing, and, you know, helped a few of us with that, you know, imparting that knowledge. So what was that experience like when you were here riding with Veloscope and stuff?
It was interesting to me. I mean, I was constantly having to do this mental check because I never thought of myself as some sort of like cycling guru, right? Sort of walked into a situation where suddenly I'm like the supposed expert because I'm coming from a context where I'm what they call pack fodder. In other words, I'm never on the podium, right? I'm just like an also ran, It's sort of like, yeah, I'm not going to get dropped. I'll stay in the main pack. But like when it picks up in the last 5 minutes, I'm lucky if I see the winner when he crosses the finish line.
Right.
Like that's my goal.
Right.
It's like I'm actually on the final turn when he's done.
Right.
So then I'm in Veloscope and it's sort of, but I sort of I was fortunate again because it is available there. Trying to remember what I was taught. And so I could share what I did know.
No, that was very useful because, we all of us were like complete novices, and that it's also like what you learn, you try when you pass on that. Now a few of us have turned coaches, and we are trying to pass on whatever we learned over the years, and that's how it kind of it's a continuum.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, how coming to TFN, and how did you get to know about TFN, and how was the experience of riding there?
So I don't know who's responsible for it, but TFN always has had like magnificent marketing. And of course back then, because I'm like have an IT background, I was on the internet. So I heard about it from cycling friends, but it was like all over the internet, even back then, in fact, it was like the only sort of semi-stage race around.
At that point of time, it was the only road stage event.
Yeah.
And there was the only other event that was happening was an MTB event up in the Himalayas called MTB Himalaya. And this was the only road event, tour and event.
So I was thinking, I have to do this, right? What I didn't know going into it, and I don't know how it's evolved. I can see it's gotten much bigger since then. Is like how incredibly varied the sort of experience level and fitness level of the people showing up.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's probably the same now. It's sort of,
it is still the same.
Yeah. So at least 50% of the people are really not there to race. They're there for the experience, right? And they'll cross when they're cross, and for them, it's a great achievement just to complete it.
Yeah.
And then the other 50% are actually like trying to do their best on the competitive segments.
Right.
And so, but of course, I don't know if it's changed, but there was no categories, right? I think there was men and women and that's it.
Now there is a like masters category.
Oh, there are.
Above 45, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And above 55.
Yeah. So, in that respect, it was also just sort of like everything's open, open men, that was it, and so it's just kind of a very strange mixture of people. And I had no idea who was going to come, because I knew that by any kind of like measure, it's like I have no business being on the podium of a stage race. I mean, that was ridiculous,
But, to put a bit of context to the listeners, you were leading the general classification
until about the last day. And I mismanaged my calories.
Right.
I bunked so horribly.
Right.
I basically I couldn't even control my legs at the top of it. And the reason, I don't know if you recall, but obviously it's burned in my memory now, is there was some kind of delay about road work or something.
Yeah.
And we were like just sitting around doing nothing for something like 2 hours. Right. And I didn't eat or drink anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so, now, of course, not just me, but everybody understands much better the importance of nutrition. Right. But probably everybody who's cyclist has bonked multiple times, right? But it's this experience where you get to the point where you can hardly control your bike and so on. And I literally fall off the bike in the ground. But, the interesting thing about bonking is that, somebody brought me a jug of orange juice. And then it's like, it's sort of like like reanimating, you know, it's sort of like you glug that and your body just absorbs it. And then, yeah, like half an hour later, I'm like feeling great. I'm riding so strong, but yeah, I lost it. And, you know, the interesting thing, because it was, you know, like a lot of stage races, it was quite varied. And there were at least 1 or 2 semi-flat time trials. And again, given body to weight ratio, I think I won all of those. And it was only the climbs where it was more competitive, right? But I was certainly the heaviest and the biggest of all of the people in the top 10.
Rajesh Nair, Baba Velo, as we call him, was you know, close to you. I think a minute and a half.
Yeah, it was this strange thing where I think I won more days. But he ended up winning the overall.
Because the last day was the 20-kilometer uphill time trial up OT. Right. So that was, you know, he was considerably lighter, and you know, as it happened, he just crashed on that day.
I remember he had some
on the way to...
Well, he had some sort of crazy high-end wheels with tubulars, right? Nobody rides with tubulars anymore, but he was super proud of his tubulars, right? But he's rolling them constantly, right? And so
he on a downhill, on a corner, the tubular tire just came off, and that's how he crashed. And then I was like, we basically thought it was over. Like, you know, he was very upbeat and wanted to win that. But then, you know, that this thing happened. You know, we had to. There was this Kaveri issue that was happening between Karnataka and, you know, Tamil Nadu at that point of time, and they were not allowing any Karnataka vehicles and stuff like that, you know, into Tamil Nadu or some. So that was the stoppage. They were trying to negotiate with the police, and we had to wait for an hour or more, you know, there. And that's what you were referring to, not eating and stuff like that. And that we just, you know, ride to Gudalur, and then just a little bit up that hill, that competitive segment starts, and 20 kilometers was the segment. And it was a very, very bad segment to actually bonk.
Oh, absolutely. The last half, I was on fumes. You know, it was sort of like sheer willpower. And the thing is, what was his name? Rajesh Nair. He disclosed to me later that, because, you know, he was like doing VAM calculations. And he says, there's just no way I can beat Mark on this, you know? But obviously, if you're like, I've got no fuel.
That's crazy. I was like, we were all... You know, at the end of the day, each day we would look at the results and, you know, try to do calculations and that was the first year where the competitive segments were introduced in TV. And it was all, you know, it was at the dinner, that was the major topic of conversation, right?
Well, you know, I remember the first day. The first day, I think, was a flattish time trial. And you know, again, because it's like individuals, and it wasn't like a mass start event. So it's not like I had any idea how the ranking actually was. And then I go up to the line and I start from the bottom looking for my name, and oh my God, I won that. And then I was thinking, oh, okay, well, my goals just changed, you know?
So that first day always, you know, acts as a kind of, you know, reality check for a lot of us. It's like, where are we can we think of competing, or there are these many people ahead. Okay, we can move up. You know, we are closer to the podium. That as all that kind of comes in, and that becomes a little bit of a, you know, entertainment as such. But
it was also interesting to see how there are, again, genetic freaks who ride into fitness. I've never been one of those people. I get steadily, like most people, you get steadily worse through the week. But as you may recall, there was a few people who were literally getting stronger from day to day.
Yeah.
It's like incomprehensible, but everybody's got their own genetic thing. So that was the other thing to see, where like a few of them were like, Balu, I think, was one of his names. He was starting out way down here, but every day he was literally getting stronger. You know, it's sort of like if we'd restarted the event, he would have been on the podium, you know?
Yeah. That was my first event, and that was my first racing experience. And I was like on my fixed gear bike, and I was like, every day I would move up one bit, and I was like, eventually ended up like 10th position or something. I was like delighted with the whole
Well, as I
experience.
recall, I mean, you went into that event with like tremendous amount of endurance.
Yeah.
Because you were like riding all over India on your crazy fixed gear bike.
Yeah. So I was so obviously shit scared about, you know, wanting to do that event. That was the only bike I had at that point of time, and I wanted to do this event, and my registration was accepted, and I was like, no, I don't have the budget to get a new bike, but I will ride. And so that 6 months leading up to that event, I rode like maybe 12,000 kilometers or something like that, you know, just riding. I was a weekend warrior until that point of time. And I started riding weekdays only to train.
Exactly. And it makes a huge difference.
And I lost like, till that point of time, I came from 92 to 78, a couple of years prior to that, you know, and got into cycling and all that. That year, that 6 months, I lost about another 10 kilos. And I was the lightest going into that. I was 64, 65 going into the TFN.
Wow. Pogacar level.
Yeah. The numbers were not anywhere close, but weight was.
Yeah, it's funny how I was speaking with Siddharth about this. It's like some people can very successfully lose weight on cycling. And of course, it's really hard to try to improve fitness and lose weight at the same time, unless weight loss is your only goal as opposed to fitness. You kind of have to pick. But for other people, running seems to have that. Like, I haven't been running much this year, but in the past, it's sort of like, if I start doing like 30 miles a week of running, the weight just drops away. And Siddharth's the same way. You could run for half the number of minutes as you're cycling, but there's some sort of signaling that happens. It's sort of like, your body does not need this amount of pounding. I'm going to like reduce weight, you know?
Nice. So that after TFN, how long, when did you go back to the US?
So, I mean, I think total, we were living in Mysore like a year and a half, almost 2 years. And then we came back, and I've come back to India, you know, several times since then. But never for living for an extended period of time. And usually when I come, I try to do at least one ride like we did today. But never, I would like someday to do TFN again, but it can't happen this year. But at some point we can do it
Maybe
again.
Next year?
Yeah, well, as soon as they add a 60 plus age group.
Yeah, I mean, we can make it happen. I'll speak to Deepak right away. We'll add it.
I need an age group or a category that only I qualify for. No, 60 plus over 6 feet tall. That's what we need. Yeah.
Amazing. Mark, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Love talking to you.
Yeah.
You'll have to edit this down somehow.
No, it's fine. You know, there is nothing really to edit, but it was all golden. So to kind of close the session, what are some of the tips that you would give working athletes to do well?
For working athletes?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, so again, give yourself a break, right? Because you don't need extra stress in your life just for that. And like for any of us, right, you kind of quickly get to the point where you're achieving everything you need for basic health. Like, so everything you're doing beyond that isn't necessarily improving your health span. It's just making you fitter, right? So give yourself a break, do something like that. The gym, I think, at least for me, helped a lot, particularly, COVID, of course, disrupted everything else. Gyms were, at least in the US, were suddenly outdoors and all the rest of it. But, and sometimes you get injuries or things like that. And so it's nice actually to be what they now are calling a hybrid athlete, right? Because the great thing about being a hybrid athlete is because of an injury or something else like that, hey, just do your other thing, right? And so the gym is sort of like, great. Like for a while I had like a strained Achilles, so yeah, cycling was just not going to happen. Running's not going to happen. But, again, as you get older, it takes forever for those things to heal. So I had to give up on my goals there. But hey, I can go to the gym. The Achilles is not going to prevent me from doing a bench press, right? So, and again, as we were discussing, that gym work is like, preventing sarcopenia is like, gets pretty important.
Contributes to your health span.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. This has been fantastic. Mark, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much.